What is going on, my friends? We are closing out this Thursday evening. Day one, night one, round one of the NFL draft, the 2021 NFL draft. This one presented by Milo's, our good friends at Milo's. Thank you for the sponsorship. Thank you for rolling with us through this NFL draft and obviously previewing all the players that Alabama had. And now Mike Rodak joins us now to discuss the first round. And the big question was Alabama going to tie and or surpass the record of 6 first-round NFL draft picks? They tied it this year with 6, and we'll start there, Mike. Just first and foremost, kind of your overall thoughts about how the night went, and we'll get into each of the picks.
Yeah, I thought it started off a little bit slow, at least in terms of what expectations were for Alabama, not only just coming into the draft this week, but even going back towards the end of last season when you first saw some of these mock drafts and you have 2, 3, 4 Alabama players going in the first 10 or 12 picks. And Jaylen Waddle went at 6, and then we saw Mac Jones didn't go at 3, and he kind of slid after that. DeVonta Smith slid a little bit further than some people were predicting. And so you got to a point there where it was a little bit strange seeing an LSU player and Jamar Chase coming off the board first. Obviously, Kyle Pitts at Florida was expected to come off, but for as good of a season that Alabama had, historically good, and some of these great players, there's actually other players coming out ahead of them at their same positions. So that was a little bit strange, but I think once they kind of got into the groove there where Surtain comes off the board at 9, DeVonta at 10, and then Mac, probably the story of the night, not only for Alabama, but, NFL wise as well. It's probably the biggest story nationally is just Mac Jones going to the Patriots and, what that fit will look like for him.
No doubt about it. And speaking of that fit, we heard from Nick Saban. He joined the broadcast, and it was interesting. He kind of opened by saying, I'm a proud papa. And you could just see the smile on his face was so genuine, so proud of all these guys. So you've got to, you just look at the talent and granted, as you said, some slippage there, maybe some expectations not met. But first and foremost, off the board for the Crimson Tide, number 6 overall pick, Jaylen Waddle going to the Dolphins. So, that coming off the board first, he'll go and be reunited with Tua Tagovailoa, which is pretty cool. But a guy that, suffered a pretty substantial injury a season ago. And hey, he's getting picked up number 6 overall. Just kind of your thoughts. We'll start there and then we'll go down the board.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of debate going into the draft on just which wide receiver coming out of Alabama would be the higher pick, which one would be the better prospect. And I think it's probably true that a lot of teams had Waddle ahead of DeVonta Smith just because of some of the measurables and the explosiveness and the big playability that he has. And that's not to say that DeVonta Smith doesn't have it. I think we all saw it last year and even before that. But Jaylen Waddle's speed and his quickness, his agility is really next level. And I know a lot of people compare him to Tyreek Hill for the Chiefs, and a lot of people around the NFL watch what the Chiefs do and want to replicate that. So that's what I think the Dolphins are trying to do down there is build that offense back up. And I don't know if there's a huge difference between him and DeVonta Smith on their board, and I'm sure it'd work out either way for him. But he ended up being the first Alabama player chosen, which again was a little bit of a surprise just given how things were looking coming in.
Yeah, and of course, I think a lot of predictions, as you mentioned, had Mac Jones going number 3. And then, if he wasn't going to be picked number 3, definitely sliding down the board, ended up going number 15. So we will talk about DeVonta here in just a moment, 10th overall. But before him, 9th overall, Patrick Surtain, Alabama cornerback, went to the Denver Broncos in the first round, SEC Defensive Player of the Year. Just your thoughts on this selection and how he fits there with the Broncos.
Yeah, obviously a team that has to play the Chiefs in that division. So I'm sure they were thinking a lot about how to defend that receiving attack and that passing attack that Kansas City has. And so a lot of people were expecting Denver to maybe look at a quarterback at that spot. They have Drew Lock, the former Missouri quarterback. I know there's some talk today about Aaron Rodgers potentially going to Denver, but at the end of the day, they chose, I think, a safer pick, and I think Surtain's probably considered one of the safer Alabama picks out there. Just in terms of his body of work the last 3 years. And, he's probably going to be a good NFL player for a long time. But the Broncos not picking a quarterback in that spot kind of caused the rest of the draft there to shuffle where, you have the Bears moving up for Fields at 11. And then, of course, Mac still being on the board at 15. So I think that Surtain pick A little bit surprising for the Broncos at 9. I think a lot of people had him going 10 to the Cowboys, but that really changed the draft coming out of that.
Yeah, great insight there. Of course, I think that's something, when things start to shuffle around and, we have all these mock drafts going into this, all these predictions, but at the end of the day, everything kind of goes out the window. And again, some surprises and expectations maybe not met or far exceeded. So DeVonta Smith going number 10 overall to the Eagles in the first round. Just your thoughts. You talk about his size, and I think that's been the big talking point, from jump, that he doesn't have the size, to equip him and to play at the next level, as one would expect. Of course, he's the third receiver taken in this draft behind Jamar Chase, Jaylen Waddle, as we mentioned. Yeah, just your thoughts on this landing spot for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be all about the quarterback and Jalen Hurts, and that's, I think, the subplot there for the Eagles was that when they moved up to 10, some people were thinking, all right, are they moving up for a quarterback, and are they trying to supplant Jalen Hurts? Because there has been talk about that this offseason, even after they traded Carson Wentz. But no, they went the receiver route. So I think that probably signals that they're confident in Jalen Hurts, that they think he's going to be their quarterback for a little while. And that could be a good thing for DeVonta Smith. Obviously, you're playing receiver, you want your quarterback position to be stable and to know what that person's going to be doing. And he certainly has experience, 2 years here at Alabama playing with Jaylen. And I'm sure there's a little bit of disappointment for DeVonta, just given you win the Heisman, you set all these records, you're unstoppable basically last season at the college level, and NFL teams don't quite view you maybe that at that same caliber, and maybe there's a chip on his shoulder that comes out of this, but he, I think, still has the potential to be a really, really good NFL player for a long time. And I think the Eagles saw that, and that's why they moved up with the Cowboys, which was a little bit strange too. I mean, to trade with a team within your own division. Yeah,
no doubt. And, you talk about just sort of slipping in the draft. And I think Mac Jones is certainly a good example of this, in the discussions kind of going into this. Mac Jones projected to potentially go overall number 3, and then he slips, to number 15, which in price tag wise and in terms of cashing in the paycheck means about, I think, is it $18 million, something in that ballpark, the difference of what he would be making. But, you just look at Mac Jones and his story and just what he has achieved and, what he's overcome, and just kind of sitting and riding the wave, I guess, so to speak. And, to land here and just kind of listening to Nick Saban talk about that, specifically going to the Patriots, getting this opportunity, thinks he's a great fit for that system, similar to that of what they run at Alabama. And just your thoughts on that, and, how he kind of fits in this franchise and the overall pick of number 15 for him.
Yeah, no, I tweeted out the stat tonight where it was, you have 10 players from that Alabama LSU game in 2019, that game of the century or whatever you want to call it, that went in the top 15 picks of these last 2 drafts. And you look down the list and, all those guys played in the game, but I don't think anybody watching that game 2 years ago would have thought Mac Jones, who was, the holder on the kickoff team or the field goal team, was going to be a top 15 NFL pick. So just how far he's come in that amount of time, I think, is impressive. And whether he goes 3 or 7 or 15, for him, it's all about the second contract. And that's the way the NFL is set up these days, really the past 10 years since they changed the collective bargaining agreement. Rookies get paid less now, but it's all about, can you make it to that second contract? And that's where you make your biggest money, especially at the quarterback position. So if he can succeed in New England, which I think that's a good, stable franchise, a good framework for him to succeed in, then the money that he lost sliding from 3 to 15 is not going to mean a whole lot down the road for him. And I think this is a good situation. I know he talked about it tonight where he secretly wanted to go to the Patriots. He was talking to Damian Harris, the former Alabama running back up there, and was telling him how much he wanted to play, for Bill Belichick and play in New England. And that's how the draft works. I mean, it works out for some guys who actually go a little bit lower. And when you have teams that are picking lower in the first round, those are better teams, and you're walking into a better situation. And at the end of the day, that might be a good thing for Mac.
All right, then we move down the board, going number 5, or the 5th Alabama player, I should say, being drafted, 17th overall, Alex Leatherwood, Alabama offensive lineman Alex Leatherwood. I think this came as a surprise to a lot of people that he goes off the board, because I think a lot of mock drafts had him going later in the first round and maybe potentially sliding into the second round. So just your thoughts on where he ended up and getting this selection.
Yeah, definitely the biggest surprise of the night from an Alabama standpoint, and even from an NFL standpoint as well. I mean, there weren't very many people picking him to be that high in the draft. There's some first-round projections on him, but more in the 25 to 32 range. A lot of people had him as a second-round pick. Some people even had him lower than that. And I think there's a lot of debate among scouts or NFL people whether he's a tackle or guard at the NFL level. And we'll have to see exactly how things play out with the Raiders. I think if you're drafting a guy at 17, you're certainly looking at him as a tackle, just given the importance of that position at the pro level. But yeah, it's just one of those things where you have a Raiders GM and Mike Mayock, who's newer to it. He used to be on TV, obviously, with NFL Network, and he kind of made a bold move a couple years ago. You might remember with Cleveland Farrell from Clemson, who he picked, I think, was 4th overall, a lot higher than people expected. And even Henry Ruggs last year, I think he took a little bit of a swing on, and has it worked out for him? No, but he's, I think Mayock thinks outside the box a little bit, and that's probably where this pick came from.
All right, as we kind of wrap things up and hit the home stretch here as we approach midnight, slowly but surely, as we talked about, it's good to be on Central Time when covering the draft, I suppose. So going 6th, the number 6th overall pick for Alabama. I keep saying overall, but the number 6 pick for Alabama went to Najee Harris. He goes to Pittsburgh Steelers, number 24 overall, and the 6th and final Alabama player to get taken off the board in round 1. Any surprise there? Did you expect him to go here in the first round?
Totally, yeah. I mean, this was, I think, the most expected pick of the night. A lot of mock drafts had him going to the Steelers at 24. It just seemed it was telegraphed, even just from you read across the NFL and what people were reporting. It was a pretty strong connection between him and that team. And, that's the style of play, too, that the Steelers bring. I think Jerome Bettis and going back to those days, it's hard-nosed football up there. And Najee Harris is a hard-nosed runner. I mean, he's a big physical guy who I think can run in the weather up there. It's just, I think he fits into that culture of smash mouth football. And it's a good pick for them. I think Najee's been a little bit of an underrated player this whole process in terms of what he did at Alabama, and even coming out of high school. I mean, he's one of the most talented players in the country and can run, he can block, he can catch, he can do a lot of things for a team. I think the running back position just gets devalued a little bit in the NFL, and teams don't always think of them as first round picks, but he's the best running back in this draft. And you'll have to see how it works out long term, but I think it is going to work out for him in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and if you want to get to know Najee a little bit better behind the scenes, we have our series, Road to the Pros, AL.com, produced by Wes Steiner. Incredible series, and that is now streaming on YouTube. You can watch all of those episodes on our web channel. I think we have one more episode that'll be launched, episode number 4, coming to you soon, sort of after the draft wraps up and whatnot. But certainly great insight, great to get to know Najee on a different level post his Alabama football career, of course, meeting and talking with his mom as well. And so go check that out for sure. Mike, before I let you go, just I guess maybe biggest surprise or some sort of expectation that you had that wasn't met tonight or exceeded your expectations that you wanted to fill us in on before we let you go.
Yeah, it's a good question. I like I mentioned at the top, I was a little bit surprised that there was only one Alabama player picked in the first 8 picks of this draft, just given the quality of this team and how they dominated college football last year, and just some of the players that they have coming in and year out. I mean, the 2017 recruiting class, I think, is something that we'll be talking about coming out of this draft as well, where there's now 8 players from that class for Alabama who have been first round picks at the NFL level, plus a second rounder in Xavier McKinney and some other players who haven't been picked yet or are still at Alabama. So that's incredible. But, it's the NFL, and teams, I think, will still find things to squabble with. And that's probably the case with DeVonta or Mac, where you had teams passing up on them. And, at the end of the day, Nick Saban will tell you it, Bill Belichick will tell you it, any of the great coaches will say it doesn't matter which slot you're picked. It matters what you do once you get to the NFL. So really after today, the number of your pick doesn't really matter. And that's the bottom line there.
Yeah, no doubt. And as we head into day number 2, what are your expectations in terms of where these Alabama guys end up? Who can we expect to go off the board pretty early in round 2?
Yeah, I mean, Christian Barmore he's in Cleveland, so it's going to get a little bit awkward if he's sitting around there for a little while. But I think he'll go at some point here, Friday night. Certainly, it's just a question of, is he going to go early in the second round, or does he get pushed a little bit further? Landon Dickerson's, I think, the other guy we'll be watching pretty early tomorrow night just to see where he goes. And a player who I think the injuries certainly have hurt him from a scouting standpoint, having 4 of his 5 seasons cut short, but still a player capable of playing in the NFL for quite some time. And then 2 other players I think we'll be watching more to see if they go Friday night or go Saturday will be Dylan Moses, and then Deontay Brown will be the 2 last guys that I would expect to get drafted.
All righty, Mike. Thank you so much. Good stuff. Thanks for staying up late with us. I know you got more work to do. That's a wrap on round 1 of the NFL draft. You can find all the updates and news and notes from that on AL.com and, of course, our social media channels. And we want to give a shout out and thank you to our sponsor, Milo's. Download that mobile app. I'm all about downloading those mobile apps because guess what? You get some free stuff. Get a free cheeseburger. Download the app. Do it. Don't wait. Love y'all. Peace out. Have a great night.